Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Now, having completed my first of 3 missions for the British El Alamein campaign in the previous video, this short one is going to be something of an in-between between the completion of the last mission and my squad embarking on its second mission, which is the assault on the position that we recce'd yesterday. Yesterday in game terms. Now, before I move on to that, you're probably wondering what the consequences of my patrol was. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me while I indulge in a tiny bit of a daydream. So I want you all to imagine, if you will, that it is 55 years from the events that are being portrayed in this scenario, and a much older version of myself is visiting the rather pleasant German town of Freiburg with the intention of consulting the military archives. My purpose in doing this, of course, is to write the glorious history of our regiment in the late war, and bearing in mind a few loose ends, which at that age, memory would be a fuzzy thing. I have come to see what survives of German impressions of a number of actions in which my unit participates and participated, sorry, past tense. And so, it is with some delight that I learn that the report from the German side of an incursion by a British patrol in late October 1942 was recorded and has survived the war. And so, trembling with eagerness, I wait while the polite young archivist brings me the papers, and I begin to read. Most of it is fairly straightforward, times, events, and then I get to the summary at the end. And it reads, and I quote, "It is my firm belief that on account of the fact that this British incursion was carried out with such a degree of ineptitude and half-heartedness, that it is only possible for me to conclude that this was intended to divert us from a real threatened sector. It is perhaps the hope of the British that we will reinforce this sector to face a spurious and non-existent attack. It is also my belief that the British, being quite canny opponents, would never commit such an undertrained and obviously quite helpless unit to an action unless they were having a bit of an off day. Report ends. Recommendations: do not reinforce this sector of the line." I read this with mixed feelings. On the one hand, I am extremely proud that my patrol, inadvertently, I must admit, had a huge impact on the fighting the next day in our sector, at the very least in terms of making sure the German defences didn't get any thicker. But on the other hand, I would be lying if I said I wasn't at least mildly insulted. But then again, looking at what we achieved on that very interesting night, unfortunately it really wasn't a lot. So now we come back to the present day. It is now pretty much the end of October 1942, and in advance of the offensive which is about to go in, I'm shrugging off my tiredness so that I can go through the table of organisation and equipment for my men. Now, I must first report the very sad news of the death of Private Bell, who did not return from the patrol. So I must cross out his name. His replacement, who I drew randomly from the remaining Enfield riflemen in the British roster, is really quite an imposing individual. Those of you who are familiar with the German infantry deck will recall that there's a Private Bernhoff who's a bit of a big bruiser, and Weitzel, I think, is his British equivalent. Look at those close combat ratings. This is not a man to mess with. And his morale of 5, I think it's not focusing very well, but his morale is 5. So he's quite an impressive specimen, this man. He's certainly no Private Bell, lamented though the late Private Bell is. So I shall replace Bell with Weitzel. And we are back up to being a full squad again. Oh yes, I must also change his stats. So, Weitzel being, gosh, a very high morale figure. What's his panic rating? 6. Doesn't scare easily either, that's handy. Now, Weitzel, of course, doesn't get any bonuses of any sort from the mission we just performed, because for the simple reason that he wasn't there. But he seems quite eager to get in on the action, so obviously quite glad there's a space that needs filling because he gets to fill it. Clearly doesn't have that much imagination to ask why the space is there, but hey, can't complain about getting keen soldiers. So, as for the rest, Private Moon unfortunately routed, so I would have ordinarily ticked him there, but instead, as it's the interphase, I'll give him a slash in the survival column. And I have to reduce either his morale or his panic rating by 1. So he's already quite low morale with a rating of 2. So I'm going to take a bit of a chance with this one and reduce his panic rating from 3 to 2. Now, if it turns out that he does a runner in the next mission, I will have no choice but to reduce his morale rating the next time, because you can't ever have a panic rating lower than your morale rating. As for Elan points, nobody got immediate Elan points because I'm sad to say we didn't kill anybody. Certainly didn't take out the anti-tank weapon. In theory, the mission was a success because I was able to identify the anti-tank weapon and its placement within the German defensive line. However, because that was so easily accomplished, I don't think I can really regard that as a one scenario. If I had eliminated the anti-tank weapon and or broken the German squad, that would have been better grounds for claiming a victory. So I'm not going to treat this as a one scenario. So over the grumbling and muttering of my men, I'm not going to give them all a Elan point for having won the scenario. However, everyone who was wounded, thankfully no one, or unpinned at the end of the scenario gets 2 Elan points. So everyone's well on their way to a bonus of some sort. Depends how we all do during the next mission. Yes, so really everyone except for the impressive Private Weitzel can treasure their 2 Elan points. Oh, nope, having said that, I was just about to give him 2 Elan points. Nope, sorry, Weitzel, you don't get that this turn. So, we are ready to go for the next mission. Now, in addition to determining whether I won or I lost, I also determined some consequences of that brief and tiny night action that we fought. The first consequence was modified by my level of success, which was pretty low. I did a random number card draw to see what the German reaction would be. And again, drawing a fairly low number, the German command decided that the threat in this sector was so minimal, I'm still a bit insulted by that, that the anti-tank rifle was in fact withdrawn during the night and assigned to a sector which was deemed to be in greater danger. So, all right, on the plus side, we don't have to face an anti-tank rifle in addition to the German squad in the next mission. Unfortunately for me, it had consequences on the British side as well. The colonel did not look favourably on the results of my action and decided that the allocation of a universal carrier to my force was a serious misallocation of valuable resources. Similarly, that's basically what was meant by a modified random number draw, which was also very low for me. So far from the reinforcement I was hoping for, where I'd at least get a Crusader or a Sherman backing us up for the daylight assault the next day, I'm afraid the rather weak armoured vehicle we had has been withdrawn. So the assault on the morrow is going to be a purely infantry bash. Now, the mission, as we understand it, is we're to eject the Germans from the defensive line that we probed during the night, and we need to gain suitable defensible terrain that can act as a springboard for our final assault the next evening, which will hopefully crack open the German line so that the formations behind us can pour through and pursue what's left of the Afrika Korps. That's the plan, at any rate. So when I embark on the next mission, I will have my gallant squad of 10 men. It's going to be a daylight attack. And unfortunately, we are not going to be supported to any great degree. So it's going to be a bit of a tough fight. It's going to be a bit of a battle of maneuver for the Germans as well, because they, of course, will be wanting to forestall us rather than necessarily sitting in their positions waiting for us to come and get them. So it is going to be a bit of a head-on, and we'll just have to see how we do. Now, I am going to make a change to the way I play this, because while I very much enjoyed making the previous videos, I did feel that there was something missing in that playing with the solitaire rules slightly militated against my habit of showing people the cards and giving them an insight into what's rattling around and what passes for my brain while I'm making decisions. And a couple of you have actually contacted me either on the message boards or more directly and said, why don't you go back to a bit of card demonstrating? And I'm inclined to agree. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue using the solitaire rules as given in Banzai. But in the following mission, the one we're about to dive into, I will be playing the British hand of cards openly in front of you, as is my wont, and talking through my decisions so that you won't get any of that empty downtime while I'm mulling over cards that you can't see off board. But of course, you won't see the German cards until they're actually played on me or in reaction to something I do. And I hope, at any rate, that will restore a bit of a balance and make watching these a bit more enjoyable. So we'll try that next mission and we'll see how it goes. In the meantime, I'm going to tell my lads to get some rest because they're going to need it before we launch our attack. So I will bid you all a fond farewell, hopefully not a permanent one. But before I go, as ever, huge thanks to all of you who've been following the series. And I'm really glad that you've been enjoying it. Thank you for all the messages to that effect. I really, really appreciate them. And as always, it makes it so worthwhile making these videos. And as always, again, to all my regulars, a huge hello and thanks for your company. Always a pleasure to see you guys and to communicate with you in the aftermath. Thank you very much for all the tips, catches, and pointing out things that I've either missed or not been very clear about. Those are always welcome, so thanks. And again, as ever, if you're new to this channel, if this happens to be the first of my videos you stumble across, you're very welcome. If you're here for Upfront, please look at my other videos. I hope you find them interesting and enjoyable. As always, thank you guys for your time, and I look forward to seeing you when we go over the top and take on the German position tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in. Bye.